right, we're good? Awesome, wonderful. Everyone, again, welcome to CircleCityCon. If you didn't know you were at CircleCityCon already, you are at CircleCityCon in the Circle City, Indianapolis. Everyone having a good time? Yeah. Woo! That sounded great. All right, well, as the slides do say, I'm Jack Hatwick, also known as Odd Job, and we're going to be talking about, the only title I could really come up with was Securing the Network. Got to raise it up at the end because it's a question. What about the data? Although that's not raising it up at the end, but whatever. It says what, so it's a question. So who am I? Who gets the reference? Who am I? There we go, Les Miserables. Who said that? Who said that? 2 people? All right, you 2 get speaker badges. Come up later. That's awesome. Great. I like that. So basically, I'm a blue teamer with offensive tendencies. And also, just so you know, I'm not a elite person. I don't sling shellcode all over the place. I don't sling Python all over the place. I can speak it a little bit when I need to. Can make out some crude scripting, but from what I hear, all the elite people are crude scripters anyway. Just get the job done. That's right. Also, I am not a noob, so I'm doing this for a while, and I like to think I know what I'm talking about, but always plenty to learn, and that's why we come to these conferences, so we can learn more, so we can discuss. And apparently they also decided to print up on the schedule, if you saw it. I am superbly sexable, which I can't believe. They did that at B-Sides Detroit, and they did it here. They printed that in their program, so that was fun to see that actually printed in there. So a little agenda. I like little things here so that you know kind of where we're getting in the presentation. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint. So we're going to just discuss the goal of both InfoSec and the threat actors we're actually trying to defend against. In case anybody's wondering, this is mostly a blue teamer talk. We are on the defense side in here. And even if you're a red teamer, how many red teamers? Any red teamers? 1? 2-ish? Okay. How many blue teamers? Oh, look at that. How many people want to get into blue team or red team? Okay, also yes. I would also like to get into red team at some point. So you need to go towards purple, right? We're trying to get towards that. So we're going to discuss both the InfoSec and threat actors. We're going to discuss data. We're going to discuss non-technical considerations to securing that data, and we're going to suggest features to look for in technologies to secure data. So this is not a purely technology talk. I do work for a VAR, but I'm not going to be mentioning brands here. We are going to talk about generic things and features, because I'm very vendor agnostic. I don't care what your firewall's name is. I care if it actually works. But however, speaking of firewalls, when's the last time you saw this headline? Has anyone seen this headline? Long time ago, right? Really long time ago. We don't see this headline much anymore. Once in a while, after everyone's made 100 articles about something, you might finally see this headline on some of the blogs some of us read. Not all of us, but some of us may read. Because we're like, how did that happen? And that might be a contributing headline or byline. But that's not a headline we normally see. Now, how many people have seen something like this recently? Okay, now more heads are nodding. Yeah, this is the headline we're seeing. And more pertinent to what we've recently seen, this was a reality a month ago. So this was a big thing. Actually, this time last month, some hospitals had to close for a day or so. Because what happens when your MRI machine gets ransomwared? No MRIs, or whatever the case. If you can't check people in appropriately, that's not going to work. You can't treat people. You can't take care of people. That's how much this infrastructure is hurting us. But really, what is ransomware attacking? What was that previous headline? What was the goal of this attack? It wasn't your network. Your firewall didn't mean anything to it. That's just an obstacle. That's just a hurdle to jump over. The real goal of any attack is not the network. It's the data. And I'm talking about all those datas. So something we got to realize is data is worth something firewalls are not. Firewalls are a cost to an organization. When your accounting team looks at your firewalls, they see an amortization schedule. That's what they see. They don't see, oh, this is an asset of ours. No, they're saying this is maybe a CapEx that's now amortizing. That's what they're seeing that as. Some risk managers on the financial side or business side may start saying, okay, we've mitigated our risk somewhat by doing that. That may be the most the business ever cares about your firewall. That's not an asset, though. It is just a resource. But data is actually worth something. Data is actually something you have that you can use that has value. How do I know? Because people keep trying to get your data, don't they? They don't try to get your firewall necessarily. Now, we know resources can be worth something, right? And I think we're especially seeing more and more of this as we get into IoT. As we're getting into these little things that run Linux boxes on them. Every single one of your cameras you see in your building or out and about, those are Linux boxes with camera lenses on them. So don't underestimate the resources you have. If it's that's just a low-powered box, ARM processor, ARM processors are pretty powerful nowadays. If you looked at your cell phone lately, those things are very powerful things. And even the things that just run in these little small embedded boxes, these little Raspberry Pis or anything that you could possibly put on a circuit board for cheap, those can be very powerful. They're not needing to run GUI. They're not needing to do massive data correlation. All they need to do is send packets somewhere. All they need to do is sniff around in the network a little more. That's all they're needing to do to become a resource. But we're not here to talk about the resources. So we know resources can be worth something to our adversary. I'm talking about what is worth something to your adversary and to you. Data is an institutional asset. Got a nice slide there now talking about. There you go. Data is an institutional asset, not an IT asset. So we have to talk about this. The rest of the company does not deal with your firewall. When's the last time somebody called up and said, hey, I need to poke a hole in your firewall. This is accounting. You had that, yeah. Maybe because they thought they knew what they were talking about. Hey, your firewall needs to go away because I'm trying to do my job. But they don't understand what's really going on. Fair enough. But the rest of the company doesn't really care about your firewall until it becomes a problem. And even then, they don't even know that's the problem. Unless you talk about it a lot to them, then they may just say firewall because they thought they heard it on the IT crowd once and thought it was cool. So they don't really care about your firewall. Who deals with your firewall? You do. You deal with your firewall. That's an IT asset. So the data is actually an institutional asset because everybody at all levels of the company deal with that data. Now, how do they deal with that data? Well, let's see. They create the stuff. Not only do your customers create it, or your clients or guests create it, partners create it, your people create it. And there's a lot of interesting processes to create that data that probably are not secure. They gather that data. They record that data. They move that data around. And we need to worry about some of that. Not only do they move that data around, they process that data, they transmit that data, they access that data, and sometimes they destroy that data. Are they doing all of those things right? And number two, if in each single one of those processes, how many times can the red teamers in here inject their payload into that process, inject their work into those processes without discovery, or with minimal discovery? That's a lot of opportunity there. So some data, as we know, is irreplaceable. You cannot replace the hours upon hours and billions of dollars you just spent creating this new drug that'll make our erections slightly harder. No one can do that. No one can replace that data. Why? Because it just got stolen by someone who got on the dark web one time and said, hey, I'll pay you Bitcoin if you go and do this. Corporate espionage is a thing. And so you can't replace that. You can't replace the cost that you put into that data, the investment you have in that data, because that data turns into product that then turns into money and profit. So it's worth something to you. That data can't be replaceable. Data also can't be replaceable if you're storing personal credentials of people, right? OPM. Anybody, maybe you can't talk about it, but who in here was part of the OPM breach? Anybody's fingerprints get, yeah, okay. So, your fingerprints, where are your fingerprints? Who has your fingerprints? You know a couple people who do, because you gave it to them, but then they gave it to somebody else, unfortunately. Not willingly, hopefully. So that's a very scary thing. Where's your fingerprints right now? And who's using them? For what purpose? What type of identity theft is being done? Ooh, what kinds of espionage, depending on who you are, what kind of espionage is being done with your fingerprints? I don't know. I can think of interesting things that could happen with your fingerprints. So who's getting that? So some data is irreplaceable. Some data is not even yours or your company's asset. That's not yours. It belongs to somebody else. And you need to protect it. So, everybody think Facebook free? How many people think Facebook is free? Oh, good. Some people I've had saying, oh yeah, Facebook's free. I just signed up. Yes, you did. And you gave them something very valuable. Your data. Did you know you don't have to give all your data to Facebook? You didn't have to tell them where you live. You didn't have to tell them all this other information about yourself. You can just give them some bare minimums. What kind of data are you giving Facebook? That's not their data. It's your data. They're going to treat it as their data because they're making money off of it. But how secure are they keeping your data? How private are they keeping your data? And keeping that safe from other people? And how good are you keeping your data private on their platforms? Not only this, but orgs tend to only value the data after a breach. But also a second other thing, the data may not even be yours or about you. Corporate data could be about your employees. That's not the corporate's data. That's the employee's data. Not only this, but it could be about your partners. So when you go to do your risk assessments, don't only think about, oh, the threats to my data inside my area. Think about the data transfers that go out to partners. What's the threat to there? Can I measure that? Because I can't really get inside their network, but can I partner with them to say, hey, what's your security assessments looking like? How are you protecting our data we're giving you? Make sure those are in your contracts. Make sure those types of things are in there so you can both keep yourselves accountable. So we understand that this is IT, not an IT asset, it's an institutional asset. So the question is, where is the data? So all this data we used to think exists here. And then it started going here. And then this came along. Well, this actually existed a long time ago. Resources made the endpoint cooler, and let's do everything on the endpoint now. And now the resources are so amazing on servers and infrastructures that, hey, now we can shove everything up to the cloud and not have to burden my resources. I'm just running my laptop on a Pentium because I mostly run this laptop. I'm using apps in the cloud. I'm doing other things with it. So I don't need a lot of horsepower on this laptop I'm running off of. And then, of course, we got these guys, your Android phones. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of data bits. And then we have these guys. We have your real Android phones. BYOD. So where is the data? He wants to know. The network is no longer the sole transit and storage place for data. Did you notice that? But then yet, we're still so concerned about the renewal of our IPSs and firewalls to try and protect our data. That doesn't really make sense to me. You have the laptops, you have all those things we just discovered, and those places cannot always, and what I find is usually cannot be effectively controlled by a firewall or an IPS. That's not what they're there to do. Even when the data is on-prem, these are hardly the best defense against attacks and breaches of data. You can control access to resources. Sure, that's what a firewall rule does. Stateful connection, keeping up with stateful connections. Great. Fantastic. Pardon me. But do you know what users traveling along that path? If they have access to that resource and data? Can you do that? Are you even concerned about that? Have you done the proper things on your servers? Have you done the proper things that... There's a lot of questions that get raised then that the firewall can't actually take care of themselves. Malware can get through firewalls to endpoints. Why? Because we have wide open holes known as HTTP and HTTPS. Sometimes FTP. Why? But those are allowed outbounds. Because why? Browser's going to browse. That's why. They need to check their email. They need to download files. And they need to stick USBs in their laptops and computers. All of those, by the way, bypass IPS and firewalls, usually by policy, because that's just the nature of doing business. Doesn't sound like an IT thing. It sounds like a business thing we need to take care of. And again, where is the data is not an IT question. So since this is really a business thing, where your data is and is not an IT question. It's not something your firewall can answer. It's an institutional question. Where are we putting our data? Let me ask everyone in here. Do you know where your data is right now? Not your personal data, but when you go to work and go at 9 to 5, do you know where that data is? No. Do you know where some of it is? Okay, kind of. What? In the cloud, yes. So we know some of the things. We know where some of the data is, but we don't know where all the data is. Do you even know all the data you have? Not necessarily know where it is, but do you know all the data you have? Do you know all the data you should be having? Do you know all the data they are gathering? Oh, okay. I didn't think so. No one usually raises their hand to that one either. So we're all very aware of this problem, this thing of we don't know where our data is. We don't know even what our data is. We don't even know who's gathering it for what purpose and what not. So this isn't something I can go, hey, firewall, please answer me where my data is, because sure enough, these net flows are going to help us. Not for that. Not for that. It'll help us for a lot of other things, but not for that. It's an institutional question. So let's go and ask the institution. Let's get intimate with our organizations. Aww. Who needs access to this data? I need access to that data. That's a cool data. I like that data. That's a cool hat. So who should have access to this data? Again, it's not something Firewall is going to be able to tell you. It might be able to identify who is attempting network access. Some people have some identity awareness type features in their firewalls that are able to track through AD and various things. Hey, who does this PC actually belong to? But it doesn't actually indicate on that layer 7 basis what was the username used for that login to that application. Because that's what actually matters. And it's probably encrypted. Well, maybe. Maybe it's encrypted internally, but if it's encrypted, it sure as heck doesn't know what's going on. Because who all's using SSL? Who all has visibility into their SSL? TLS. Oh, wow. Let me ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10 $, how expensive is that? Like 8? It's pretty big. Big payloads, or I'm sorry, big amounts of traffic you're having to do with that, or small? Medium. I find that the smaller you are, the more easily it is to deploy SSL, if you can afford it, because there's not so many places you have to put it. But most people don't have visibility into their SSL. So that's not something you're going to even be able to detect anyway. We have to ask the organization. They're the ones creating it. They're the ones using it. They're the ones handling that data. So let's go and talk to our friends over in operations. Once we talk to our friends over in operations and we say, hey, what all data are you actually doing? I saw this application online the other day. What does that application do? Why do you need it? Was there a reason why you guys chose that process? Is there a reason why you chose this? Can we come up with a better solution? We have to ask our org. Not only this, but from a technology standpoint, a lot of people are doing network DLP first. Who's doing network DLP at all? Any type of DLP? DLP. Is it network or endpoint based? Both? Oh, fantastic. But did you start off with network based? Probably. And that was the thought. Hey, let's do network first. But again, that SSL portion of it, getting actual access into that data stream, that's not going to exist on the network, the ability to do that, unless you do some type of decryption method. But at the endpoint where the data is actually packaged up neatly, where the application that's talking to is, we might be able to actually do something about that then. That might be a control we can use. But first, before we even talk about technologies, this, again, is not necessarily an IT answer for everything. This could simply be a change of business operations. First, before we start dealing with technology, let's simplify and consolidate the data that we have. Let's actually consolidate those handling methods. So if you have hundreds of different handling methods for gathering data, think about every single step of that way, from data creation or gathering to data deletion. If there's hundreds of methods for each of those steps, try to get that down by half is amazing. Because why? Now you're not have to look at all of these things and provide controls for all of these things in technology. Now you've only got this much to deal with. So the more narrow you can make that scope, it still has to be useful to your customers and users, still has to be useful and convenient for your folks on the inside to use, but you've got to change that business process, and you've got to limit those things down. And a lot of times, how many times have you gone to somebody and said, you really shouldn't do that way, you should use this app we have over here, or this system we have over here. And how many times, and how have you ever heard, oh, I didn't know about that? Anybody? Anybody? I didn't know about that? Okay, I see handshake. All right, I see headshake. Good. I didn't know about that. I didn't know that internal resource existed. So sometimes it's simply a matter of you've got processes that are secure and working well. Just get your people to use it. And again, a firewall might not be able to tell you that. Don't make your changes about culture. Anybody know Wolf Gerlich in here? Name dropping here. No, he and I talk about this from time to time. It's he has a thing. He had a nice little talk on his blog he runs, YouTube channel he runs, and he talks about culture, and he talks about work. He says in security we've been trying to make our stuff we're trying to make people do. We're trying to make it about culture. Encrypt all the things. You know, that's great, and it's a wonderful thing, but that's more of a cultural thing. Don't click shit. Well, that's a cultural thing. And it's not really technical to not click that. But let me tell you what, someone is going to click it if I'm the accounts receivable. Yes, or the accounts payable. If I'm accounts payable and I receive an invoice or whatever that is, or saying, hey, I want to pay this bill, and it's a PDF, do you think they're going to click it? Yeah, probably. But what about if you change the business process for how we handle invoices and how we handle accounts payable, handle bills? That email now looks suspect. That's not how I do my job. That's not what work looks like. If you've ever been in county government or seen county government and how it works, it's funny what happens sometimes is the auditor goes and retires, and then his deputy auditor becomes auditor. And then the next deputy auditor becomes auditor because they run for election, right? And so it just kind of gets handed down from auditor to deputy auditor for like 5 of those generations. How many of those processes is like, oh, well, that's just the way we've always done it? Now, how many of you people have been in your organization and director after director or accountant after accountant or whatever, that was the way I was trained, that was the way I was taught, that's the way I've always done it, so that's the way it is. What if we can, again, that may be a part of culture, but it's part of work. You know what? We have this brand new process for you. Here's what it looks like. You're still doing your job on the back end of entering in data, but you know what? You're gathering it differently now. That is not an appropriate way to gather data. That is not an appropriate way of being solicited for paying bills. It's just not the way we do it. And so you encourage better practices in work, because when work looks like work, it's going to get done, because it's a part of my work. When security looks like work, hey, that's going to get done. The same is also true for your threat actor. And again, because of that invoice that had ransomware or some other type of payload dropped, if it looks like work, the threat actor is going to look and say, hey, I can make my payload look like work. And it's going to get done. Every time. Pen testers know that. The phishers know that. Once operations are changed and agreed upon, now you can start looking at technologically supporting those operations. Now you can say, now I have something to manage, now I have something to audit, now I have something to assess and look at and make sure these practices are being followed. So that brings us to our next question. What's a control? There's a lot of people who would just say, oh, buy this firewall, or buy this WAF, or buy this IPS, and that's your control. Right? You might say, oh, I'm buying this NAC, and that's my control. Really? I have 3 things that I generally consider, and I'm open to putting more up here. These are 3 pretty big pillars. If we're going to use a thought leadership concept there, pillars. Managed. Every control that you put in place, if you want to call it a control, needs to be able to be managed. You might ask this question, the tool may ask you this question, why don't you look at me? So, you should be able to determine if that's even deployed and up to date. Turnkey and set it and forget it is not a control. That's definitely not a control at all. Dashboards need to be customized and looked at often. This could be something as simple as ensuring that your AV is actually installed and in scope on all of your in-scope endpoints and servers across the organization. It may be as perhaps ensuring that the appropriate policy is also installed on your firewalls. Is that policy good? Do we need to clean up that policy? Is it being managed? Is it being touched often by your staff? How about backups and patches? Yes, your systems have to be patched. Yes, firewalls have 0 days. Every single bit of software that you're going to use or hardware you're going to use to control things, it's going to have 0 days. It's going to have vulnerabilities that you need to patch, keep backed up, and configurations backed up. Make sure you're doing that on a normal basis. Operationalization. Do you do anything about me when I say something? So the tool needs to be configured to inform the NOC or SOC or some administrator, hey, something's going on over here. This does not look right. And you've told me, tell you when something doesn't look right. The tool should be able to take some automatic remediation steps. There should be a little bit of orchestration involved in your tools. Can you detect something and then kick something off to something else and say, hey, deal with this? That's a powerful control. When you have a tool that your tool should be part of a documented workflow for your engineers and analysts, there should be documentation about that so that they know when they see this, this now is what they need to do. Have you operationalized that tool? A lot of people end up dropping tools or dropping products that they spend a lot of money on and can actually do a lot of stuff because they didn't know how to use it. And they didn't know what to do. So get your training involved too. If you're not trained on your tool, if you're not familiar with your tool, if you just thought it was turnkey, I'm going to set it and forget it, it's not a control. It needs to be able to be audited as well. So, do you even care what happens to me or if I'm doing my job? What if this was an employee, right? Do you even care if I'm doing my job? Do you look at me to make sure that no one else has been in the tool? Do you manage access and audit that access, or do you just give everyone the admin account to your tool? Oh, just use root, just use admin, just use whatever. That's fine. Now, how do we know who's been doing what in my changes? Have you tested the efficacy of your technology? Have you tested that actually that technology does exactly what we want it to? And you can only know some of that by doing some threat modeling. That's again where you got to talk to someone like Wolf or someone else. Who does threat modeling more often, but you need to take a look at your threat models. You need to take a look at the actual data assets you're worried about being taken. Figure out the methods that are going to be used to get to that data, and then come up with appropriate controls. But the thing is then, does that control actually fit this model? Does that control actually do the thing I think it's supposed to do? Have you tested it? When you do pen tests, or when you do some type of assessment, do you consider those use cases? And do you say, hey, it actually did the thing we wanted to do? It didn't stop it, but we knew something was going on, and we stopped it further on down the kill chain. That's effective as well. Do you test tools to make sure they're actually doing their job? So non-network technologies. So we've talked about our network technologies that we can. We've talked about kind of some network technologies in and of that, but let's talk about non-network technologies that we can use to control our data. First of all, like we said, I said, do you know what data you have? We need to have some data classification, discovery. So sometimes this is part of DLP solutions. DLP is kind of a funny thing as I look at tools. DLP, for a lot of things, whenever someone says, oh, we do DLP, no, you have a button that has some DLP features along with the scope of what your tool deals with, which is nice, and that's good. It's great when your tool has a DLP feature, a part of it. It gives me more ability to control certain things. But is it actually a part of my DLP program? Is there actually, do you have something that's more geared towards DLP? So sometimes data classification is part of DLP solution. I think if you're going to do DLP at all, it needs to have data classification itself. It should allow for some type of custom identification of data types. Not just regex, because we all know that when you start inducing regex into a situation, now you have 2 problems to solve instead of 1. So, and what standard of regex are they going to be using? So, got to be careful about that. Should allow classification of data at creation manually and automatically. So when your people are using their Word, or they're using something else, a word processor, some type of data gather creation method, is there a plugin or is there a way to say, hey, I just saw that. That looks like data that is something that I care about and I want to take care of in this way. That's a high-risk data type. It's going to be classified this way, and now you're only allowed to store it over here, sir or ma'am. Is that automatic? Can you even do it manually where someone says, oh, this data is definitely classified. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, this data is classified. It needs to be encrypted. It needs to have all this done with the policy. At least that. It can't do automatic. But you should look for the automatic as well. It should be highly available with actionable, or highly auditable, rather, small print here. It should be highly auditable with actionable reporting. Did the person not manually select the data classification? Or did they opt out of the data classification for some BS reason? Would you ever know? Would you ever get alerted on it? Endpoint DLP. It should have cloud app recognition. So if someone's trying to get up to a Box, if someone's trying to get up to Dropbox or something else, it should be able to say, oh, I know what that stream looks like. That's Dropbox. Let's see what we're dealing with here. Nope, not allowed to put that up there. So we should be able to also have device and peripheral controls. What device did you just plug in there? Was that a PCI card? Was that a USB? What type of USB device was it? Was it storage? Is that the approved storage? Is it encrypted? Is it encrypted according to our specifications? Is it encrypted using the keys that I understand and know already? That's the type of level that we need here. And it should also have terminal services features. If you have terminal services or if you have some remote features, you need to also include those in there. We can also go through database, and we can look for behavioral analysis of that database, like MongoDB. Funny things that can happen with MongoDB when you just put it up on the internet, for instance. You get ransomware because, no authentication. So you need to be taking also a look at your database that does have authentication. Hey, what kind of activity is going on? Is that anomalous for this user? And you also need to look at locking down your access to users and tables and even fields, schema changes, all of this stuff. Is this person allowed to do that? Is that service account allowed to do this on this server? Mobile management. There's a whole topic we can go into there. But the big idea is containerized data on your mobile. If someone's using corporate data, it should only be able to be accessed through this container that has a VPN connection. Not only that, when someone leaves the company, it stays in that container, and we just click a button. Next time it checks in, it says, bye, blows up the container. You didn't have to have access to their endpoint. You didn't have to have access to their mobile device. You didn't need to see any of their other data on there. You just needed to see that container. You just destroyed that. You didn't destroy their entire phone. So that's a lot more palatable for a lot of people to swallow in the environment. And don't, for the love of God, forget device, file, and drive encryption, and don't forget the Oxford comma. Yes. Now we can talk about the cloud for just a little bit. I try to find data in the cloud, and that's all I was able to find. So let's talk about pizza real quick. So we have pizza over here. Pizza as a service. When you're traditional on-prem, you had to do everything from figuring out what toppings you were going to use all the way to getting it to your dining table, right? When you're dealing with IaaS, like AWS or Azure, we're dealing with the pizza dough down through the toppings. So you can see as you get forward to, oh, we just went to Pizza Hut. We're just dealing with the pizza. We're just dealing with the end result. Well, let's see how that looks over here. We see all the way from physical security of a data center all the way to the data classification and accountability. On-prem, you're responsible for everything. Maybe some data center with the physical security is responsible for it, but you're responsible for making sure that that stuff is secure. But with an IaaS provider, they're taking care of the physical security of the data center. They're taking care of those hypervisors and host infrastructure. They're taking control of some of the network controls. Routing and some of the other stuff is going to have to be taken care of by you. And then when we take a look at platform as a service, we see with S3, you can access the platform and figure out how the scheme is going to work. But when you go over to software as a service, you don't get to determine how that works. You just get to determine maybe what types of data gets to go up there. That's it. So you need to understand where in the cloud your stuff follows or falls, and what types of controls you can actually put on that. So in securing the cloud, I kind of have some steps here to go through. You need to be able to gain visibility into it, not only into the actions that are going up there in the cloud through API commands. So we're not doing anything yet. We're just gaining visibility. So find ways, whether it's security as a service or something else, find ways of actually gaining access into that and gaining that visibility into what's going up in your cloud, from users, from DevOps to data. Start setting up your IAM, making sure that only certain people are allowed to do this, and also with federated services with your partners. Make sure that you're controlling that. Work with your DevOps and infrastructure to securely template and deploy. Are they configuring those templates right? Are they deploying these things right when you start getting to that network? Control your access to those API calls. What are those API calls allowed to do? Did you know there's some security as a service products out there that can actually control the types of API command calls that are being made and what they're allowed to do app to app? And also control the network traffic in IaaS via some virtual network appliance. Yes, you can, the stuff you enjoy on-prem, you can enjoy up in IaaS. And you can still firewall, you can still WAF, you can still F5, you can still do all those things. Load balance. I said a vendor. Oh my gosh. CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokerage, security as a service is then something you should start looking into. Could go through all that. I'm going to leave it up there for a second so that you can get it on YouTube later. The cloud-based solutions are designed to look at threats and access into IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So you can gain visibility, and not only gain visibility, but also do something about it. And not only just do something about it from a technology standpoint, but use that visibility to go back into DevOps, go back into business and say, you know, we should be doing something a little different. And you can advise them further on that. Because again, at the end of the day, it's about the data and the access to it. Again, still, it's not even about, oh, we had a firewall up there, oh, we put a load balancer up there. It is about, hey, what is going on with their data? Where are you putting it? Do you know what kind of traffic that puts out? Do you know the difference between a PaaS and IaaS and SaaS? Do you know the different type of security that we have to worry about now with that? And are you actually taking appropriate measures to control those things? So just to wrap up, data is an institutional asset, not an IT asset. Network technology is usually not in a position and doesn't have the features to secure the data. Access to the resources, sure. Ports, sure. Connectionless, or being connection-based, yes. But not the actual data itself, not that layer 7 all the time. Unless, of course, you have SSL visibility. Maybe you can do some stuff. Since data is institutional, security has to be built into business operations first. Get intimate with your organization. Beyond your basic perimeter security, you have to start getting involved and must pay immediate attention to your data rather than your network security. I actually had somebody tell me once, I'm not going to do anything about my endpoints. I only care about my data center. I said, do you realize what your endpoints touch? The data center, the thing you're trying to protect. So you need to at least talk to the endpoint folks and say, hey, we need to be on the same page here. We need to develop the same type of security expectation. And many technologies actually do indeed exist to control these things. But it's very important to understand, again, one control does not control everything. One platform does not control everything. You have to come up with a mature situation here where you know your controls, you know your threats, you've modeled those, and now you're putting in place good controls for each of those. But it's based on where's my data. Because again, that firewall is not an asset the business cares about. The data was. So that's our wrap up. You still need to have network security. This talk wasn't saying, oh, get rid of your firewalls, get rid of your IPSs, just go back to routers with ACLs on them. I've seen that. You don't want to do that. No, I'm saying let's actually make sure we understand what our controls are doing and what the goal of those controls actually are. And also to explore security beyond the perimeter. Any questions? I think I only have like 2 minutes left. Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Any discoveries? Anything that you go, hey, that was not right, I've seen something entirely different. Or maybe you say, that's right, but I've seen this instead. Any questions? Comments? No? Okay. Well, hit me up on Twitter, 0ddj0bb, or you can also see me in Speaker Lounge or walking around. I'll probably have a camp director hat on. I have a challenge for the con and everything, but thank you guys for your kind attention.